Hi, Martin. How's it going?
It's going great, going great. We're getting into the time of the year up here in upstate New York where I'm just so excited to get out there this weekend and enjoy the fall colors. Uh, Kevin, thanks for being generous enough with your time to come on here and talk about something that I really enjoy, and that's preparing food in the outdoors. But before we get into that, tell us a little bit about you.
Sure. Yeah, I live in Canada, Thunder Bay, Ontario. Got a wife and three kids, and I really enjoy backpacking and canoe tripping up here. We have a lot of lakes, as you do in upstate New York, and that's a thing that I like to do. My background is in forestry, and I moved up here when I was younger to get into forestry, and discovered I love the outdoors up here. So um, that's kind of me in a nutshell.
And Canada is a beautiful place, a lot of great opportunities to get out and enjoy the outdoors where you're at. Um, yeah, you have your YouTube channel and you cover a, a number of topics on there. But the one that really caught my eye was your cooking. You dehydrate food, and specifically more recently, you talked about eggs, how to backpack with eggs. What inspired you to start dehydrating your own food for your trips?
Well, when you try and go deeper and deeper into the backcountry, your load gets heavier and heavier, and you've got to take some actions to reduce that load. And dehydrating food was the way to do it. A lot of people can go for an overnight or 2 nights and bring fresh food or even canned items. But if you want to go deeper and deeper into the backcountry, do a 2 week trip, you really need to bring dry food with you. Otherwise, you're just not going to be able to carry it. Um, you know, so I started doing that when I started getting into canoe tripping, deeper trips into some of the forests around here, and learned how to make my own meals, and started really simple and then got more complex, and realized I should share some of the techniques. I noticed at the time there was a bit of a gap in YouTube, and there wasn't a lot of people covering that. And I figured I had just started YouTubing, and I got started because a friend of mine said, you're going on a camping trip, you take a lot of still photography. Um, you probably have a little red button on that new digital camera of yours. Why don't you give that a try and shoot some video? So I did. I made a video. It was just of our family camping trip. I shared it with friends and family. I didn't expect it to be like a thing that other people would watch unless they knew our family. And I didn't make another video for a couple years. And after a while, I realized, hey, there's a lot of people watching that canoe trip video I did. And I started thinking about, okay, what can I do in terms of the how to? The how to part of YouTube is a big part of it. It's why I watch. And I realized there was a bit of a gap there, and I had something to offer.
Yeah, and you're right. I mean, how to's are, I mean, YouTube is like the number two search engine next to Google. So when
Yeah.
somebody's looking to do something, fix something, or how do I do my first camping trip, or in this case, how do I prepare foods for the backcountry? And I think it's a great idea. Like I said, I'm guilty of that.
Yeah.
I'll go on there and I just like to see what other people are doing because I've been dehydrating my own food for oh, maybe 15 years or so. And just a little background on why I started doing it is I have some food allergies, and I was finding that
Yeah.
most of the commercially prepared dehydrated food just had ingredients in it that I couldn't eat or didn't agree with me. Uh,
Absolutely. That's a big reason to get into it. Food allergies, or even just preferences, or the size of the meal. The meals that are out there differ widely.
yeah.
So you can control your size, your portion size. You can control all the ingredients. You can certainly control salt. A lot of people complain about salt in some of those store-bought meals, and you save a lot of money too, I think.
Oh, I one year when I was going out on it was about a 2.5 week trip. Yeah, I added it up. I did the math, and to feed myself on my dehydrated meals for that period of time, I might have bought two or three commercially made trips, uh, meals because yeah, you're not just buying one, you're buying a whole bunch of rice, right? You're buying a box of rice. And how far can that go, right? Then there's the vegetables. And if you're
Yeah.
creative about it, you just buy a handful of ingredients, right? And the next thing you got 4 or 5 meals you're making out of that.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. Yeah. And I guess that's another way I started, and I recommend people try as well if they're not into the hardcore full meal dehydration. Go and look through your grocery store. There's a lot of, Hamburger Helper and instant, well, not quite instant, but easily cooked mac and cheese meals and potatoes and all kinds of stuff that you can add a little bit of dehydrated hamburger to and make a meal out of.
Right. Those instant mashed potato packets. Something I love to do is I have my own little shepherd's pie. I know you have a shepherd's pie recipe on your YouTube channel. And what I do now is I get those and I break them up into single portions for me, and I dehydrate vegetable textured protein meat or sausage only because I
Yeah,
don't want to take the chances with the fat. I'm not a vegan or a vegetarian, and not there's anything wrong with that. But for me, it's just I do it to try to avoid the possibility of the fat going rancid in the meat.
yeah,
Uh, and then I have a vegetable. I get mixed vegetables from the grocery store, from the frozen food section, dehydrate a bunch of those. Those end up going into a bunch of different things, by the way. I have my own little Indian concoction I make, and a Thai recipe I have that where I just, like I said, I fill up the dehydrator with all these mixed vegetables, and yeah, and I'm just kind of putting a little bit in this. And you're right. I mean, you go to the grocery store, you can get a little creative, so you're not dehydrating everything.
yeah, yeah. You can certainly do that. Instant rice,
Yeah,
I do my own rice, but a box of instant rice is going to save you some time.
yeah. And for me, as I said, I started out for dietary reasons, but then it just started to become a bit of a hobby, like an add-on to my experience. Did you go through that,
Yeah,
Kevin, when you started dehydrating your food?
yeah, I did, and I think I pushed myself a little bit to do meals that are a little bit different that you don't expect in the backcountry. I guess a couple of my most popular ones are lasagna and butter chicken. Butter chicken is something they eat in the UK quite a lot. It's very, very popular. It's a traditional Indian dish, I guess. And I've got other YouTubers making my meals on on their channels, so that's fantastic. And it's those are just things that you don't think of bringing. Like everybody sort of thinks of hamburger and rice or whatever, and I've got a few of those meals that I just love and bring on it almost every trip. But um, celebrating the trip with somebody else and making a really great meal for them that they don't expect to have is, I don't know, for me, it's part of the experience.
I've spoken to a dietitian who's always experimenting with different foods, and we joked about you turn your kitchen into a bit of a laboratory. I've gone through this. I'm going to
Yeah,
experiment and see what I can come up with. All right.
yeah,
You go through that? Yeah.
absolutely. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, for sure.
And it
Yeah,
does add to the experience.
yeah, it does. Yeah, and as long as you have the time to prep ahead, you can make some pretty interesting stuff and bring diversity. I think another thing people really crave is diversity on a trip. Not everybody's like that. I got a friend who makes the same, 5 or 6 meals, and he goes on some very long trips. But I think most people like some diversity, and reaching into that food barrel and pulling something out that's different every night is a bit of a reward.
Oh, absolutely. As I mentioned in the intro, food boredom. It's a real thing. If you talk to
Yeah,
people that are out there for a long time, if you're eating the same two or three meals, you get tired of it fast. There's countless stories of people that set out on these long distance trails that think, okay, this is what I'm going to eat, and I'm going to put this in every resupply box for the next 3 or 4 months. And
yeah,
yeah,
and
you
some
you
people
get
can do
tired
that.
of it. Yeah, I'm not one of them. I
Yeah,
tell you
neither
what,
am I. I like some diversity. Yeah,
I tell you
for
what,
sure.
people have heard me say this before, and I wrote about it in my book. Maple oatmeal, right? Brown sugar maple oatmeal. And I love it, right? I finally this year have gotten back to eating it, but it took me 3 years because after 2.5 weeks of eating it every morning, I got tired of it. I couldn't bring myself to even eat it again.
Yeah, for sure. And I oatmeal is the go-to, and for on a lot of trips, right? It's very easy. Oatmeal, some dried fruit, some sugar. I sort of came up with, I think I've got like 10 different oatmeal recipes in the book, spread out on 2 pages, because I just thought let's try and hit the diversity. So I did a whole bunch of research on different oatmeal recipes and came up with, I think I got 10 of them there. Take a look at it here. I've got quite a few anyway. Yeah, at least 10, I think. 11. I've got 11, 11 oatmeal
11.
recipes. So
Wow.
yeah, just to give some diversity. Some are things a few things in my book aren't things that I would eat all the time, but some of them are there just to show the diversity. And if it's your thing, then you can enjoy that, or you can maybe get inspired by seeing some different ingredients that you're not used to.
Mhm. Something I started doing a few years ago with breakfast is taking the breakfast cereal and some powdered milk and some fortified milk and mixing it in there. Like, what is it?
Yep.
Nido, I think it's called, right? And putting that in there to get the extra vitamins and nutrients you need, and using that to kind of mix up my breakfast regimen a bit.
Yeah, for sure. I'll add that to my oatmeal. I also dehydrate yogurt. You try and avoid the fat, and I recognize that. But I've had good luck with 2% yogurt. I'll dehydrate that and add some fruit to it, and rehydrate it all, and that's really good. Eggs. You mentioned the video about eggs. I uh, I bring sometimes I bring fresh eggs, but often I'll bring the new powdered eggs, the crystal eggs. Those are just fantastic. They taste really really good. If people are still remembering the old powdered eggs from the 80s and the 90s, those are gone. Well, maybe they're still around, but the new egg crystals, the freeze dried egg crystals, are fantastic. They taste just like real eggs.
Yeah, I heard a joke one time about the old powdered eggs. Right? How do you make them taste better? Put them on top of a piece of tree bark and eat it.
Yeah.
That's about the only, that's the only way you're going to make it taste any better.
And I used to use powdered eggs in baking recipes and stuff, but no, the egg crystals now, they're a little, again, they're a little expensive, but they're worth it if you enjoy eggs.
Yeah, and that's on my next overnight. I'm actually considering bringing eggs with me, and I'll tell you, I watched your video, the idea of breaking the eggs and putting them in a container, and just the next morning, if it's just an overnight, and especially this time of
Yeah,
year, they'll be
yeah, for
fine.
sure. This time of year, yeah, this time of year, you're doing well. It's probably a little warmer where you are than where I am, but not much. And yeah, shoulder season is a good time to crack some eggs into a jar and bring them along.
Yeah, I saw that. I said I could put some peppers and onions and maybe even some frozen sausage or
Yeah,
something just to, because let's face it, you stick that in there, it'll be thawed by the morning. You got a nice breakfast you're eating out there on the trail.
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, perfect.
You talked about dehydrating eggs. I tried that one time and I didn't take them out with me. It was one of these things where I said, I'm going to try it in the house. And then the next day, and they just didn't reconstitute, didn't have the flavor I was looking
No
for.
way. Okay.
Mm.
I've tried them two ways. I used to have like a casserole, a breakfast casserole dish that I would make, and I would dehydrate it, and it had fat in it, and I've moved away from that. But that was dehydrating cooked eggs, and that kind of worked. And then I experimented once. I cracked a bunch of eggs and dehydrated them, and they came back fine. They came back like scrambled eggs, but they're very fatty, and I really worry about them going rancid, and salmonella is another risk as well. So yeah, I don't recommend that to anyone. There's tons of videos of people doing it. A lot of people have success, but you don't want to get sick on a trip, right? You wanna,
Yeah, right.
especially when you're in the backcountry somewhere. Like that's the worst kind of being sick, when you're relying on your own body for propulsion, right? to get you around. You certainly don't want to get sick.
Yeah, in the summer months, I was looking at it just to say, all right, for a 1 or 2 day trip, but yeah, you do that for a summer trip where you're going to be out there for any long period of time, and yeah, day 5 or 6, you might find you might not be feeling so well that night or that afternoon.
Yeah, I just don't think it's worth it.
Yeah. Well, I had to make sure I had to taste it to see if it was worth it for myself too, and I was like, nah, you know. But as far
Yeah,
as you, I'm going to try those egg crystals though too that you recommended in your video.
yeah, they're very good, and they last a long time. So if like you, if I'm doing an overnighter, I might just bring some fresh eggs and might even crack them in a jar. But if I'm going for a longer trip, um, I'll bring one of those package of eggs, and there's a dozen eggs in there, and that'll last me a while. I might alternate that with oatmeal or something else. Um, the other thing, you can get the ready crisp bacon all in the stores. It's already cooked, and so you can have bacon and eggs in the backcountry, and live almost like you're at home.
Right. That's shelf stable. Right. So you fry up some
Yeah,
scrambled eggs and then just heat up that shelf stable bacon in there. And yeah, and you've got bacon and eggs.
yeah, yeah.
To me, it's once you allow yourself to get into creating your own meals, it's fun. I just feel like, rather than, just, you plan, you get out there, you do your trip. To me, it just has added a whole nother component to my backpacking experience, like I said earlier, right? Because here we are, we're talking about this and getting excited about, yeah, well, you could do this. No, to me, it just adds to it.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. Yeah.
Well, with lunches, what do you do with lunches? How do you dehydrate any of your
I
foods for lunch?
Sometimes I've got some spreads that I sometimes do, some hummus. I mean, hummus is one of those things that's pretty heavy when you go buy a jar of it in the store, but you can make your own and dehydrate it. Just leave the oil out and add the oil in camp. So hummus and other spreads are great. On a canoe trip, not on a backpacking trip, but on a canoe trip, I'll often do some baking. I'll make bannock or some flatbreads and have some spreads on that. And otherwise, I usually just bring like a dried sausage and cheese. And um, my lunches are more of a picnic than a meal. I do have some soups. Like if it was really cold and rainy, a nice warm soup would be great. So I usually pack a couple of those for those um, that kind of weather situation. But yeah, mostly it's breakfasts and dinners that I focus on in terms of dehydrating food, and occasionally I do some lunch stuff.
Mhm. Yeah, my approach with lunch is pretty much peanut butter, honey, um, and sometimes pepperoni and some mozzarella sticks. I try to keep it simple. It's more like you said, it's more like a picnic type of thing. Things that are quick,
Yeah,
easy, you can just
yeah, I
grab out
find,
of your bag and put together.
yeah, very few people. I mean, some people do. Some people make an event of lunch and they bring out the stove and they get a coffee going or something. But most people like to grab some granola bars and drink some water and get on with their travels.
Yeah, for me, lunch is a rest period. It's not the time when I want to be
Yeah,
pulling my cook set out and setting up and having things to clean up. And no, I want to eat my food and maybe even depending where I'm at, even just lay back and take a little nap. I've been known to
yeah.
do
I was
that
gonna say
after
a little
lunch.
snooze. Yeah,
I've
for
had
sure.
lunch at near lean-tos and said, you know what, I'm gonna go over and take a quick little nap before I head back out on the trail.
Yeah, absolutely.
How about fruits? Do you prepare any fruit type snacks or anything you bring with you?
Yeah, that's another sort of lunch item that I do bring. I just love pineapple and peaches and that sort of thing. Most fruit dehydrate really, really well, and they're easy to dehydrate. Um, when I was writing my book, I got into trying different fruits, and pomegranate is kind of a thing you don't think of, but you can get those seeds out of your pomegranate and dehydrate those and sprinkle those. At home you can sprinkle them on salads or something like that. But in the backcountry, I'll throw that into some yogurt. Orange slices, they're hard to dehydrate because the liquid on the inside of an orange slice doesn't want to come out in the dehydrator. You got to poke it with a fork or cut it open or something. But there is nothing more flavorful than an orange slice when you a dehydrated orange slice. They don't look very good. They don't. They're sort of shriveled and brownish, but bite into one and they are super flavorful.
Yeah, because that's something that I had done right from the beginning when I first started dehydrating. Because how important is it to have, that it's something a lot of people are going to the outback can overlook, thinking we can live on Pop Tarts and junk food for days or weeks at a time. But it is just so important to be eating the right foods. And when we can dehydrate fruits and vegetables, that just puts us so much
Yeah,
closer to balancing that diet. And something like oranges. I mean, how cool is that to be getting a little shot of vitamin C while you're out there?
yeah, getting your vitamins and your a little bit of fiber, which is always good, in the backcountry, and I do fruit leather as well. Got a couple fruit leather recipes that I like to use, mango and strawberry and that kind of stuff. Just it tastes really good. It's just wonderful to have.
Kevin, you mentioned a book. You've written a book about dehydrating food.
Yeah, I have. It's called Backcountry Eats. It was sort of my COVID project. I started this a long time ago. Took a buddy of mine out on a backcountry trip. He wasn't a backcountry traveler. He's done some front camping, but never did a big trip. We did a big trip in Quetico Provincial Park here in Ontario, a big 2-week trip. And at the end of that, I served him a meal, and he was like, "Wow, you got something different here. This is really good. You should share this." And so, close to 20 years ago, I started compiling recipes and stuff. And during COVID, I got around to putting it all down into a book, and it's doing quite well. It's a self-published effort, and it's broken even in the first year, so that's really, really good. That's a little bit rare for a self-published book. It's called Backcountry Eats. It's popping around the Amazon's bestseller list for that genre. So yeah, it's doing great. It's becoming very popular, and I think it's getting recognized as kind of there's 100 recipes in it, but there's the whole front section is all about how to dehydrate food, different methods for dehydrating, how to dehydrate individual ingredients, and how to put your own meals together. People love recipes, but I've always wanted to teach the technique, and so I think I've got both in the book.
I'm certainly gonna purchase that book. I'm like I said, always looking for new recipes and things to try. And we'll put a
Yeah,
link to that
yeah,
in the description for the podcast if people want to look that book up. Uh,
awesome.
Now with the dehydrating, I've talked to people that are a little intimidated to try it. Now I bought a commercial dehydrator, and I paid $50 maybe or so years ago. I bought it in 2007,
Yeah,
I believe. It still works great. And it's not that difficult, right? I
it's
mean,
not hard.
oh,
Like basically, you want to remove fat, so it's best to start with something that doesn't have fat in it. But I've got different techniques to remove fat from hamburger or sausage if you want to do that. But start simple. Slice some bananas about a 1/4 inch thick, throw them on that dehydrator, and turn it on and see what happens. It's best to get a dehydrator with a thermostat. Things like bananas and pineapple and others will turn brown if you do them too hot. So vegetables and fruits should be turned down a little bit. There's a few tricks, like bananas will turn brown anyway, so throw them in some water with some lemon juice before you put them on the rack. But yeah, pineapple slices right out of if you buy canned pineapple, just put those slices, they're the perfect thickness, put them on the racks and turn it on, and 8 to 18 hours later, you've got something good. Um, yeah,
yeah.
it is
I mean,
quite easy.
I remember the first time I did it, and funny enough, bananas was the first thing because they're easy to do. Like I said, bananas are a very easy
Yeah,
thing to dehydrate, and it's a good starting point. It's hard to mess up if maybe it comes out a little brown, but it's still going to taste fine. But I
yeah,
just remember the kids and everybody being, "Wow, this is really cool! Like we made something here," And then I
yeah,
tried
yeah.
doing
There's
beef
there's
jerky too.
Yeah, beef jerky was probably an early experiment of mine, and it's a little bit more involved because
Yeah,
it turns out a bit better if you salt that beef first and let it sit overnight, maybe with some other flavors. I just have 1 or 2 beef jerky recipes because the internet is full of jerky recipes. Go get a jar of your favorite Asian sauce, and drowned drowned your jerky in that overnight, and then put it on the tray. The next day, you'll have something really good.
yeah, yeah. And again, that was an early one that I did. It was easy enough, right? When I got a lean cut of meat, marinated it overnight. I just used barbecue sauce, and
Yep,
again, we were all
yep,
amazed. Wow, this is great. Yeah, this tastes really good.
yeah. It usually turns out fantastic.
Yeah.
I've rarely had one that was a failure. I don't think I have had a failure. I've had some that I've over salted, but on the trail we didn't mind it as much. it's hard to get wrong.
All right. But and back to this aspect of preparing your own foods for the backcountry, it's rewarding.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
As I
Yeah.
said, there was my kids were younger when I started doing it. And, there was a certain amount of excitement when we were like preparing our own foods to take out on our camping trips. We were dehydrating the food at home and deciding what we want to put in there.
Yeah, for me, prepping for the trip is a big part of going, and I enjoy that prep. Some people don't like the prep as much, but as soon as temperatures warm up after Christmas into the new year, there I start dehydrating food, getting ready for the new season, the summer travel season, and I store it in the freezer. You don't have to, but I tend to store my meals in the freezer because they keep almost forever if they're in the freezer. People ask me like, how long will these keep? And it all depends. It all depends on how good of a job you do removing fat, removing moisture, storing them in a cool, dry place, keeping them out of sunlight, keeping them airtight. If you do all that, easily 6 months, very likely more than a year. I've had meals that I've kept out of the freezer for more than a year, and they were fine. If you put them in the freezer, they last almost forever. So that's why I keep them there.
Yeah, I have a vacuum sealer that one of my
Yeah.
sons had given me a while ago, and that's what I do. I start preparing. That's how I get through the winter. I do day hikes, and I start preparing my food for when the weather gets warmer. And when I get back
Yeah.
from my summer excursions, if it's left over, I vacuum seal it and stick it in the freezer, like you said.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't always vacuum seal, but if I'm going on a longer trip, I take that time and do that, and a little bit more of a peace of mind knowing that your food is airtight.
That's the reason why I do it. I don't know how necessary it is, but just when I had the equipment to do it, I just said, let me just take this extra step, this extra uh,
Yeah.
uh, safety measure here. And yeah, and like I said, it's not that much work to, just like with the dehydrating, it's not that much extra work to vacuum seal up your food.
No, not at all. Yeah. Pretty straightforward.
You have any, you've written the recipe book, but has that mad scientist gone away? Or are you still experimenting with coming up with new recipes?
I am. I am. I don't have a pad thai recipe in there, and I'd like to do one. And pad thai is a little bit like there's different styles, right? Like, do
Hmm.
you put shrimp in it? Do you put egg in it? It can be a little bit complicated. So I'm slowly working out a pad thai recipe, and yeah, I'm always looking for something new. And YouTube is a great source. I've copied a couple of meals, not for the book, but I've found meals that I liked online that somebody else was making, and I'm like, oh, I'll make a video of a backcountry version of that same thing. And that's fun, just experimenting with different cuisines. I find Middle Eastern cuisine, in particular, it doesn't have a lot of fat in it. Mediterranean and Middle Eastern foods uh, tend to be very fat-free. Chinese foods as well. So I'm sort of experimenting with more of those kind of things. Just again, the diversity thing, learning about foods that aren't my tradition, and yeah,
So you look at a food, I've caught myself doing this sometimes, and say, you know what? I think I could make that dehydrated. I think I can make that backcountry um, usable. Do you find yourself
yeah,
doing that?
yeah, yeah, absolutely. And that's the butter chicken was a big part of that, and lasagna and risotto. Risotto is one that comes out almost as good as when you make it at home. It's just it reconstitutes so well.
Mhm. Yeah, I that goes on in my house. There's certain foods I will buy at the supermarket and then have to confess to my wife, well, I want to experiment with it at home to see how well it would do if I brought it out on the
Break
trail.
it down. Yeah.
She'll
Yeah,
see me
break it down for sure.
with
And
a bowl and hot water in it, and what are you doing? I want to see how this works on the trail.
yeah, for sure. Yeah.
Kevin, do you have any tips for people who are just starting out or considering getting into dehydrating their own meals?
Yeah, you can buy the book for sure. That's one tip.
That's tip number one,
But
buy the book.
that's tip number one. But in all honesty, I've trying to give away as much of the knowledge that's in the book. The book is just like, it's all in one package in the book. I One of the reasons I wrote the book was because I was struggling with producing enough video to show all the content. So my other tip would be to go and look at some of my videos or other videos that are out there. I've got one on dehydrating food methods. It's an old video. It's an early one of mine. It's a low resolution, um, poorly edited. I did, I've had a lot of skill development in YouTube since I made that video. My daughter helps me, and I do 6 or 7 recipes all at once, and I show the method. And my method is pretty straightforward. It's, if you're going to have meat in your meal, then let's say it's ground beef, then boil that ground beef so that you get all the fat out of it. Pour boiling water over that ground beef, and then dehydrate your meat separately from the rest of your meal. Meat should be dehydrated at a slightly higher temperature, um, usually around 180 Fahrenheit, and it rehydrates very well if you do that. There's other techniques for ground beef, but I find boiling is really good. People fry it, and that sears the meat, and it doesn't rehydrate well. So dehydrate your meat separately at a higher temp, and then make the rest of your meal without any fat, of course, and then dehydrate that at around 135. Most of the ingredients will dehydrate about the same speed, a little bit different. And then I've just got two two items to mix later: the beef and or the meat and the rest of the meal. If there's any dairy substitutes like milk powder, I'll add that in, or spices, I'll add that at the end. And that works really well. I used to do it. You can do it different ways. You can cook your whole meal and dehydrate the whole meal, including the meat, but it doesn't rehydrate as well. It's easy to manage. Um, or you can dehydrate every ingredient separately, but then you get into this problem of managing ingredients. I've found, like, if you're going to have a lot of meals, you're going to have a ton of ingredients, and you go to assemble a meal and you can't remember how many grams of dried onions go in your meal and whatever. So I try and keep it really simple. Make my meal, dehydrate my meal separately from the meat, and then combine it later. And I find that that's probably the best tip I can give anybody, is to sort of learn about that hybrid method. I've got a video about it, and I also describe it in the book. But that's probably the best tip I can give anyone.
Well, we're going, as I said, we're going to put a link to the book in the description for the podcast. And Kevin, how can we find you? Where can we find you?
Yeah, you can find my YouTube channel. It's called Kevin Outdoors. Pretty easy to find. The book is available on online, both at Amazon and other places. I have a website about it. You can learn more. It's called backcountry-eats.com. That's backcountry-eats.com. And folks can find me on Facebook. Again, Kevin Outdoors.
Well, Kevin, it's been a pleasure speaking with you and listening to you and having you share all this with us as uh, a fellow dehydrator, outback dehydrator, and somebody who likes to experiment with food. It was great chatting with you. Thanks so much for
Yeah,
coming on here and
likewise.
sharing all this. All right,
Thanks
everybody,
for
get
having me
out.
on your show.
Oh, it's been great, and we'll be in touch soon. Everybody, get outside, have some fun, and be safe. And buy Kevin's book. I am.